What's the scariest rural place in the USA or Canada for your car to break down? Story 1. Wyoming. It's a really cool place, but there's just nothing there. You might as well break down on another planet when it comes to some stretches on the interstate, let alone smaller roads. Drove through Wyoming on two separate road trips up to see a friend in Idaho. It is so vast and desolate, it's haunting. I remember the first time through, I looked over at my friend and said, "This is the perfect place to bury a body." It was a tense few minutes before we both burst out in hysterical laughter. Also, the best pizza I've ever had in my life was a tiny joint in Rawlins. Story 2. For me, it was West Texas. No idea about the people, but it was unnerving. I drove through it at midday night. No cell phone signal. No radio, no power lines. Hot as hell. At night, you could see occasional flashes of light in the distance of one of those fuel things that spit out fire out the top. Then every once in a while, there would be this random small house or rundown looking trailer out in the middle, a good 10 to 30-minute drive from the road. I always wonder what their story is. Cut off from the world, in the middle of a desert, though I do not dare to find out. I was born in West TX, lived in a little town called Kermit. The haze from the oil always had sunsets and sunrises looking purple, and at night, by God, it was so quiet out there. When the town was asleep, there were no crickets, no cars, no wind, just utter silence. And the AC unit down the block. It was so remote, but man, if you ever got a flat tire, there was seriously like a 70% chance any given car would stop and help. My dad got flat tires all the time, and we were never sitting for more than 20 minutes before someone stopped to help, even if he already got the spare on. 70 miles to the nearest hospital, 50 miles to the county courthouse. People knew they lived in the middle of nowhere and were really friendly because of it. It's not really the same now. People don't stop anymore. Everyone thinks everyone is actively trying to end them, and the desert isn't nearly as barren as it used to be. I think Kermit has about 5,000 people now, had less than 1,000 when I lived there. Story 3. My dad and my brothers and I had a breakdown in Death Valley in midday in June about 20 years ago. We were on the way from Ubehebe Crater to the racetrack, and he was going too fast on the hot dirt road. Two tires blew out, and he only had one spare. Luckily, we were well prepared enough that we made it to the ranger station by like 1 a.m. And after night fell, it was easy going anyway. Most beautiful night sky I've ever seen in my life. It was like I could see every star in the universe. But it's called Death Valley for a reason, and there's a few unprepared Europeans who die there every year. Story 4. Rural Southeast Oklahoma. I've lived in some places, but the experience of substance users on the Arkansas and Oklahoma border in the middle of nowhere, that was terrifying. I witnessed a man in overalls, no shirt, dive out of a ditch on the side of the road, roll across the gravel road into the other ditch, and then just stare at me while I waited. There was an entire family that just disappeared, like man, woman, child, dog, gone into a rural area and not uninhabited or super wild, just rural, no thank you. I've seen wrong turns and Texas chainsaw. I'm good. I came here to nominate the southeastern corner of Oklahoma. My granny lived near Idabel and managed to be a well-known and reasonably well-liked person in McCurtain County. But there was a menace to those people you could feel when she wasn't around. And this was back in the 1980s before substances and opiates took over. Oh, and if you get run off the road or die mysteriously there, which you probably will, no police work will be done. Story 5. I drove an old truck just rebuilt to transmission from Fairbanks to the lower 48 back in early April of this year. I brought 4 bins of parts, oils, and tools with me because I was absolutely terrified of breaking down. There are parts of the upper Yukon that are hours away from the nearest gas station, let alone the nearest hospital. It was also minus 10 Fahrenheit when I started, and I had my contingency sack with cold weather gear readily available. I also brought a minus 30 Fahrenheit sleep sack and a propane heater. I tried to prepare for a breakdown as much as possible, but I knew that if I were to wreck, I would most likely die. If I slid off the road or I hit a moose, I would die. I couldn't count on anyone to be there to rescue me or perform life-saving aid but myself. So I would agree with an earlier comment in the fact that some parts are so desolate, you have no hope of survival other than yourself. You can plan for it as much as you'd like, but when it's out of your hands, you're essentially leaving it up to luck. Story 6. US 14 between Huron and Pierre, South Dakota, especially in the winter. Dark, narrow two-lane road with mostly no highway divide and almost no towns or people, and very few gas stations. Remember the highway scene in Fargo, where the family in the station wagon drives by after the cop gets stopped? It's like that. Also, McDonald Pass in western Montana. Pretty much impassable in winter and often closed, so if you break down, there's a good chance you'll freeze out there. Used to be in Montana, the highway department would put up a reflective cross wherever someone got ended on a road. Driving up that mountain pass and seeing those damn things will creep you out. Story 7. We were stationed in northern Montana, 10 miles from the Canadian border, and a 40-mile trip to the nearest town. My car broke down on the dirt road 10 miles from our AF site. I sat there wondering what to do. No cell phones then, when a truck came by, and a man got out to help me. Turned out, he was from my hometown in Ohio. I mean, what were the odds of that happening? It was crazy. Broke down in 30 below zero weather, same area, while pregnant. Got out and started walking to the only cattle barn I could see. I was bundled up in my husband's work coveralls that I found in the trunk. Thankfully, a farmer drove by. These are those sparsely traveled roads. I always considered it a miracle both times. Story 8. The eastern San Luis Valley in Colorado, especially around Mount Bianca up to the Great Sand Dunes National Monument. Creepy as hell. Strange lights at night, numerous cattle mutilations, just high weirdness and feeling watched the whole time I was there. I wanted to climb up the sand dunes, but got there on a cold February middle of the night. Tried to sleep in the parking lot so I could climb up and take pictures of the sunrise. On the dunes, felt creeped out in the pale light of the parking lot all alone. I found out about the stories about the mutilations and UFOs only after I visited and searched for why it felt so creepy. The eastern San Luis Valley in Colorado, especially around Mount Bianca, up to the Great Sand Dunes National Monument. Creepy as hell. Strange lights at night, numerous cattle mutilations, just high weirdness and feeling and watched the whole time I was there. I wanted to climb up the sand dunes, but got there on a cold February middle of the night. Tried to sleep in the parking lot so I could climb up and take pictures of the sunrise on the dunes. Felt creeped out in the pale light of the parking lot, all alone. I found out about the stories about the mutilations and UFOs only after I visited and searched for why it felt so creepy. Story 9. The only place I can think of is where I used to live for some time. It was next to a smallish town, and next to the town was a small city, maybe 15 to 20 minutes away from where I lived. Therefore, the road was an actual road, not gravel. There were very few houses, and the road was basically at least 3 miles of a skinny road with forests on each side. It was basically the most hillbilly redneck thing you could think of. All of the driveways were made of gravel or dirt, and a good amount of houses had Confederates flags. If your car broke down there, you were screwed, to be honest. Even I got scared sometimes coming home at night. If the cliche forest killer didn't get you the coyotes and bears, probably would, or the rednecks. Story 10. If you meant scary rural, as in no help for miles, then the desert in Nebraska. I mean, even when you see ads for phone coverage, Nebraska always has the least amount of coverage. Barely anyone lives there. It's just nothingness, just the desert. There isn't a whole lot of water in the desert there either. You can't go more than 2 days or so without water, and without help for miles, you could easily die. If you were looking for scary rural areas, you don't want to find help, then Muskegon Heights in Michigan. I think it may have made it on the list of worst places to live in the US, but I could be wrong about that. It has some of the highest crime rates and lots of substance users. Michigan is crappy as it is, but Muskegon Heights makes it crappier. Both are scary and wouldn't want to break down in either one. Story 11. There are several places I can think of across the south and southeast for various reasons. As for rural, there is a stretch of road, Y9, across northern SC, just across the state line from Charlotte, that feels like driving backwards in time to some primordial era. The crap I've seen cross that road at night would give you the creeps, coupled with the unbalanced nature of the few that live out there and the xenophobic attitudes. Also, the PD wildlife area. Just get the feeling something is watching and ready to snatch you up. Anywhere in the western and central part of Virginia. I'm talking in the Farmville and Appomattox area. Pretty populated, but people certainly know that you aren't from around there. Always got the feeling they were hiding some big secret and not very welcome. Parts of South and Central Florida. Homosassa Springs used to be a no-go. They were just nuts out there, down near the Everglades at night. Just no. Of course, there are also places in New Mexico where you just don't go any time of the day or night. Just keep driving. You're not wanted there. Story 12. Welcome to Highway 16, also known as the Highway of Tears. Personally, I find the highway between Kitwanga and Dees Lake much more terrifying because there's no cell tower for, I don't know, 8+ hours of driving. Dees Lake doesn't even have a cell tower. They have a single payphone with a lineup. There's tons of don't hitchhike signs because of the amount of people that go missing. And I personally met one of the people who I have no doubt is responsible for some of those people. Just terrifying. The only thing that saved me was he didn't know we were in a dead zone, and I had my phone in my hand. Besides being scary because of the amount of people disappearing from their broken down vehicles is the bear populace. But honestly, they don't bother me. I walked home from Terrace to Kitimat, 60 kilometers in the middle of the night after being robbed. Bears weren't the thing on my mind. Story 13. I had a strange encounter when I was a teenager. We were headed to the Red Rocks for a concert in Colorado, but we ran out of gas in the outskirts of a reservation. Seriously, in the middle of nowhere. Within 10 minutes, an old native man drove up to us in his pickup and asked us why we were there. We tell him we were out of gas, and he immediately pulls this gas tank out of the bed of his truck, proceeding to fill up our car. In that short span of time, 4 more cars pulled up on the road and were watching us. We thanked the old guy and tried to offer him some money for the gas. He turned us down and just said, "Go, just leave right now." It was weird. The guy was really nice and everything, but he was so adamant that we just needed to leave immediately. Story 14. For me, it was off of Monticello Road here in South Carolina. To explain, I ran a food truck for my former employer. We worked an event off of Monticello Road, and the food truck was a POS food truck. Constantly gave me problems. It would die in the middle of me driving it, and before you ask, yes, it had gas in it every single time I drove it. The food truck was produced in the mid-90s. I was leaving the event and had missed my exit for the interstate. I tried to get turned around, and keep in mind, it was running when I got to this specific area. As I was driving up a hill, the food truck died, on a hill. And the first words out of my mouth were, "This is the literal hill you decided to die on?" Now, this area is bad. Tons of illegal substances and thefts in this area. I called my boss because obviously I don't want to be in an area that's unsafe, especially for a woman in her mid-20s, and that's driving a food truck that has hundreds of dollars in cash on said truck. My boss didn't answer, so I had to call the owner of the business I worked for. He was convinced this truck would run, and we could get it back to the store it sat at. It got running for a total of maybe 10 minutes. I told my boss I just wanted to get out of there, given it's a rough part of town. Needless to say, it died again, this time on the side of the interstate. So we had to leave the food truck in this rough part of town. Before you ask, we grabbed all the valuables we could off the truck before leaving it. It got towed to a mechanic that my former boss probably still uses, even though the mechanic didn't know what he was doing. Said mechanic had worked on this food truck more than once and continuously sent it out with the same problem. Needless to say, I quit that job. I'm now at another job that is better for me, both financially and mentally. Story 15. My ex-husband and I lived in Loudondale, WUV, early in our marriage. It is semi-rural on the outskirts of the capital city. One night, we heard a car full of kids make a bad turn in the curve. As they sat in the car, we also heard a truck drive by with a couple of men calling them names. The truck drove on, and then after a few mins, we heard them come back saying things, and then we heard them throwing a metal object and hitting the road. Next thing, the kids ran up to our place, begging to use the phone to call their dads. We let them in. We were getting ready to go check things out anyway. They were black teens, and we understood what was going on. Their dad came to get them as we let them stay in our place until they were safe. Story 16. There's a place in Saskatchewan. It's a wrecking yard out in the country north of Saskatoon. If you ever broke down there, you'd not only be greeted by the stereotypical junkyard dog, though he's actually friendly, but a pale little angry-looking man with a unibrow. Beyond the old broken airplanes and amidst the countless gutted vehicles, there's a gigantic mound in the center of it all. It must be about 4 or 5 stories tall. A narrow vehicle path spirals around the insanely steep slopes of this dirt tower. It's littered with rebar poles, car hoods, and sections of wire fence. I think that might be what's holding it all together. Up at the top, Surrounded by barbed wire and even more fencing, there's a camper and a bunch of antennas and, oddly enough, whirligigs. Apparently, the old man who owns that land lives up there in the summer. I just can't fathom why. The king looking out over his kingdom of junk? Okay. Story 17. So I'm not from the area, but my mom randomly rented a crappy trailer on the outskirts of Fort McCoy. We are both from NY, and I was supposed to stay at her place when she came back to NY to check on my grandpa's estate after he died, and I was going to live there. My BF wouldn't let me because of the bad vibes of the area, and the trailer was a studio trailer attached to another trailer that served as her landlord's shop. It was so depressing. So, anyway, that whole area up to her place is scary as crap. Bad vibes, barely any light at night, and barely any cars. There's only a pizza place, a post office, and a gas station and grocery store combo with barren shelves there, and the whole place just made me feel creeped out. So I don't know if it's just me being from NY that made me freaked out, but even my boyfriend called it the boonies. It felt very much like a place you don't want to live if you're not white. Story 18, Vidor, TX. My mom told me when I was young, if you run out of gas in Vidor, TX, push your car to the next town. It's a small town about 10 minutes to the east of Beaumont, out in the piney woods of East Texas. East Texas in general has a bad reputation for its unfriendliness towards people like me, see Jasper. But Vidor, in particular, was very well known in the 90s for forcefully, thanks to the Klan, becoming an all-white town. And when they tried to desegregate it, the black people they moved into the city were scared off by white nationalists within months. For my mother to call out this tiny town, specifically, especially considering we lived on the other side of Houston from it, made me understand that it was not to be forgotten. Story 19. Anywhere between Mexican Hat and Bryce Canyon, southern Utah. The Moki Dugway and beyond is especially remote and is basically a real-life Jeep commercial during the day. Easily one of the creepiest, poorest, most remote deserted places in the country, and it's also spectacularly beautiful. Since you mentioned it, not a place you want to run into strangers who don't have an obvious reason to be there. I drove up in a car at 2 a.m. running with two people inside parked in scrub grass off a 4x4 trail and was sufficiently creeped out. When I went to check the next morning, the car was gone. It had been parked near a gate to an abandoned farm and ranch, which was open, and there were hundreds of bullet casings all over the area, presumably from people using it as a shooting range. But you could easily just drop a body out there and it would just never be found. Story 20, Nevada. My uncle broke down in the middle of nowhere, Nevada once. He and his wife were moving, and their gas gauge messed up, and they ran out of gas sooner than expected in the middle of the night in the desert in Nevada. They called AAA, but in the meantime, a black car with no plates and tinted windows came and parked directly in front of them with their lights on. They stayed parked there for about an hour and left as soon as the AAA guy showed up with gas. My dad also had a similar experience while on a delivery to Nevada. That place is terrifying because of the secret government crap they're up to out there. Story 21. New Orleans East, 101 murder capital of the U.S., and getting up there in worldwide rankings. New Orleans police is too understaffed to show up for pretty much anything anymore. Katrina kids are just now hitting their prime crime-committing age. I've told my family members never to stop, no matter what, in New Orleans East. Eating the cost of a new tire or rim is a better outcome than standing on the side of the road there. Car accident, probably a scam to carjack you, don't stop. Not like the cops will do anything for a hit and run anyhow. Just keep going. It is not well understood outside of New Orleans how dangerous this place is. Story 22. I've seen a lot of people mentioning Northern Ontario, specifically Sault Ste. Marie, Kenora. As someone who has done an extensive amount of traveling in that area, family is from just outside of White River, I would take breaking down there over anywhere else in a heartbeat. Mostly because the people are genuinely nicer and have learned how to do things for themselves over the years, so it's a lot more likely that someone can help you. I will say this, the cell service is questionable at best, but along that portion of the drive, you should be able to bounce between towers. Now, once you leave the main highway, yeah, that's where you could run into trouble. But the TCH is traveled so frequently, you shouldn't be too long before someone would find you. Subsequently, my family is from a super small rail town, I think maybe 1,500 people, maybe. In 1997, my grandparents were going to the next town over. An hour and a half drive along an old logging road. They left early in the morning and were in an accident with a logging truck around 10 a.m. The logging truck's whole load of lumber spilled over onto their car, ending my grandma on impact, and my grandpa was stuck in the car with her. The first person to find the accident didn't arrive on scene until close to noon and then had to drive about 40 minutes in either direction to get help. They didn't arrive back with first responders until close to 2:30 p.m. Of course, at the time there really weren't cell phones and definitely not that far in the bush.